Get set for a new perspective with Mike Sherbino and Julie Stautland. Today, how do we deal with someone in our lives who monopolizes us, leaves us feeling confused, misunderstood, consumes way too much of our energy, but we just can't seem to put our finger on exactly how or why? Some people are never satisfied, no matter how much we try to love, help, and please them. Well, it's a good thing Andrea Anderson Polk is here to talk about her new book, The Cuckoo Syndrome. The book helps us fend off the cuckoos, those unhealthy relationships, our own toxic thinking and self-sabotaging, and instead discovering new purpose, vision, and meaning in our lives and in God. A fascinating conversation with Mike and Julie as we learn and uncover ways to let the truth set us free.
Well, welcome today to The Perspective, and I'm glad you're with us because if for no other reason, the title of the book has got to captivate you, The Cuckoo Syndrome. I don't know what went through your mind when you saw that, Julie.
Well, not when
I hope you were thinking of me.
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
No. So what about you?
Well, I got thinking about the title and I was reading a little bit about the book, and all of a sudden this song kept coming back to me from I'm confessing it, The Sound of Music. My sisters watched it ad nauseum over and over again.
I love that movie.
Okay, that's fine for you. It's not really a guy's movie. And then, my own daughters watch it over and over. And so you hear things. Mm-hmm. And by osmosis, you take things in. And I knew there was some song that in the part, the kids go, cuckoo, cuckoo.
Don't you play that every night when your kids, 5 girls? I mean,
we're not even going to go there. So this morning, finally, on the way in, I Googled which song in The Sound of Music does the cuckoo thing.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, and I'm not going to tell you. You're going to have to figure it out yourself. But here to help us unpack the whole thing is Andrea Anderson Polk. I'm so excited she's with us today. Andrea, thank you for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Mike and Julie, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Just reassure me that the title for your book didn't come from The Sound of Music.
It did not, but I must say I watched that movie growing up, and my mom had this sort of innocent crush on Christopher Plummer. So
yes.
As The Sound of Music, that's what I think of. And I had no idea the cuckoo was in the movie. That's a fascinating fact.
Listen, you're the counselor. Maybe you know. No, I won't go there. Okay.
He was a Canadian too, by the way.
Yeah, it's all fun.
Oh.
But okay, so it is a fascinating bit of information about the cuckoo bird.
Right.
And I was reminding my wife about it last night. And but why don't you talk to us about why you titled the book after the cuckoo?
Yes. Well, the book originated during a particularly difficult season in my life. I was navigating a really complicated and confusing relationship with a close family member. And I had done therapy, worked through a lot of the more traumatic issues around the relationship. And I was in my quiet time one morning and really praying through setting some new boundaries with this person. And I felt like I had forgiven this person. Like I said, I've been through therapy. I have compassion. I understand why this person does the things that they do. Yet I was still having trouble making room for myself in the relationship. I was always left feeling guilty and selfish. So simultaneously, I learned about cuckoo birds of all things. And like your comment in The Sound of Music, you think about this wooden figurine that pops out of a clock in your childhood. And I learned that cuckoo birds are predatory creatures. They're cruel, clever. They're nature's infamous deceivers and manipulators.
Wow.
So I was sort of geeked out in my. It is terrible. I was geeked out in my quiet time, and I thought, I really want to understand the science behind this, and even the scripture and psychology. I love to mesh those things together. And I saw this photo that I brought on Wikipedia of the cuckoo bird,
Neat.
which you can see it takes over the nest, and this poor host parent is nearly swallowed trying to feed it. So when I saw that photo, I had this breakthrough aha moment that I was looking for with the family member. And I thought, I have this cuckoo relationship in my life that is completely exhausting me. It's this one-sided relationship that's right in front of me, and I didn't realize it until that moment. But I can get into later exactly what they do, but that was the breakthrough for me, realizing the analogy between cuckoo birds and human cuckoos.
Right.
You know, it's interesting as you just share that little snippet with us, my mind starts to spin ahead because there are so many relationships that come and do that in our own lives. They want to rob us of things. They want to masquerade as one thing or another. And a lot of times it's rooted in the other person's selfishness, maybe in narcissism, a whole host of things. Would you not agree?
Yes, and narcissism comes up a lot. And I specifically didn't use that word in the book because I feel like our culture sometimes misunderstands that word, or they sort of label this person's a narcissist. And so the book, the purpose of it with the Cuckoo Syndrome is that all cuckoos have one thing in common, which is we are the host. So it really helps you dive into what is making you susceptible and vulnerable to attracting these cuckoo relational dynamics. It could be someone with narcissistic tendencies. That's definitely very common in my clinical practice.
Well, maybe you can unpack that a little bit more for us. So how do we find ourselves in these situations? Like, what are some of the things that really define someone who's toxic?
So the most important thing to realize is the way that you are feeling in the relationship. I tell my clients a lot, if you feel guilty or selfish for setting boundaries or having a voice, that's a signal there's a cuckoo dynamic. Because a lot of my clients, they're people pleasers, they're rescuers, they're fixers, and they find themselves with this unnecessary suffering and this haunting confusion around, I'm investing so much time, energy, and attention into this relationship, yet it's not reciprocated. It's this one-sided relationship that leaves them drained.
So what is the one thing that really lets us know this has gone beyond being helpful and being there to it's not healthy? Where is that tipping point?
The most common phrase I hear among my clients that is a signal that they have a cuckoo dynamic in their life is they say, Andrea, I don't know who I am anymore. And I feel like I've lost myself. And in the book, I make this analogy between the eggs of the host parent and our purpose. Because essentially what happens in nature with cuckoo birds is the female cuckoo will find a host nest, like a robin's nest, for example. She sneaks in a very tricky way and lays an egg in the host nest that looks identical to the robin eggs, for example. So when the robin mother comes back, she doesn't know she's been tricked, that there's this imposter egg in her nest. So she sits on the eggs hatch, the cuckoo chick egg hatches first, and immediately and instinctively murders the other eggs in the nest. And then
what's wrong with this picture?
I know, right?
Like, well, Lord, why did you create this thing in nature? So, but that's just the beginning of it. It's a long, hard life for the host. For us, again, in nature, the cuckoo bird has this insatiable appetite. The parents exhaust themselves trying to feed it, and then tying it back to our purpose, their eggs never hatch and come to life. So not only do they not get to raise their own young, they're exhausted by something that doesn't belong in their life in the first place. So So Julie, that's really the issue is your purpose becomes this other person, the relationship, or behaviors within yourself. Then your eggs, your purpose never hatches and comes to life, and you lose yourself, essentially.
Wow, that's a good point. Well, listen, we have to take a quick break, but stay with us, everyone. We'll be right back talking about the Cuckoo Syndrome.
You know, sometimes just to unwind and keep it all together, I get in my truck and go for a drive. Sometimes I get on my motorcycle. We do all sorts of different things to try to keep ourselves together. We want to help you in your journey of life, to keep it together, to discover God's principles for living. All this month, I want to make available to you free of charge Dr. Grant Mullen's amazing book, Emotionally Free. It's a prescription for healing, body, soul, and spirit. I love this book. I recommend it to people. I want to give it to you. Write to us at theperspective.tv. Andrea, I want to jump back into the conversation as we're thinking about the Cuckoo Syndrome. Let's talk about what's going on in our minds. And as a professional counselor, what is it that you see happening in people's minds? You know, they often say the battle is in the mind. Is that true? What battle?
Absolutely. Our thought life is a huge contributor to ways that we find ourselves suffering. And our emotions also play a huge role in this process. There's a chapter in my book called The Cuckoo of Not Feeling Your Feelings. And I found with my clients that when they are avoiding their emotions, essentially they are fearing their feelings instead of feeling their feelings, which we all have a tendency to do. We've all learned to fear and avoid our emotions, and that ties back to our thought life, because when we're not aware of how we feel and we avoid painful emotions, we develop all types of defense mechanisms which happen in our thought life, like intellectualizing or minimizing it. It's not that bad. It could be worse. So we all have ways that we lie to ourselves, which blocks out the truth. And our emotions contain truth that helps us understand our thought life, our behaviors. They're all very much connected.
Well, listen, I want to jump in and ask a different question, because we're talking about how the host is, you know, a recipient of the cuckoo. How do we recognize if we're the cuckoo?
That is a great question. There's a chapter in my book that's called When You Become a Cuckoo. And what I've seen happen the most in my clinical practice is the relationship that we have with ourselves can be one of the most unhealthy relationships. And what I mean by that is a lot of people come into counseling and they anxiously sit on my sofa and they want tools to fix themselves. And they, instead of seeing themselves as a person worthy of love and compassion, they see themselves more as a problem to be solved. So that and I think also as believers, we have this tendency to want to be healed and to fix ourselves. And you know, we develop a lot of worth and value around how we handle our problems. And that becomes a cuckoo in our life, because we're elevating this knowledge above relationship and intimacy with other people and the Lord, because we're constantly anxiously trying to fix our problems.
It's like separating our thoughts from our heart, and when they need to be connected and flowing together, right?
Yes, exactly. That's a great point. It's, you know, we've created spirit, soul, and body, and being able to recognize when we sabotage ourselves is a huge part of being free.
Yeah. You know, as we talk about being free, it's almost like there are a lot of blockers that we consciously or unconsciously have in our lives. You know, a lot of times we do not want to receive the truth of who we are as God's people.
True.
And because of PTSD, various things that have happened, we live there because we've chosen to believe the lie. How do you work with clients to walk into a place of freedom that God's intended for us?
A lot of my clients will come to me and they'll say, Gosh, Andrea, we've had maybe 2 or 3 sessions, and I feel like I've experienced more freedom in our time together than 3 months, 3 years with another therapist. And they say, what is that about? And I answer them, I'm not trying to fix you. Because therapy is very much, it's a relationship. It's not something that's done to us. It's something that happens through us. So it's a co-creation of change where I'm very actively working with my clients to understand their thought life, their emotions, where they feel that in their body, what they're experiencing in the session. It's very much a relationship, and that relationship, that experiential knowing, is where that the truth and the freedom happen. In fact, John 8:32, the Greek word for know, you shall know the truth, is ginosko, which is an experiential knowing. It's not just intellectual knowledge.
It's almost like a aha moment for the person.
Yes.
That's what that just came to my mind.
Yes, that's a great word, Julie. It's a breakthrough aha moment that comes from relationship. Yeah.
So it's interesting for you, as you talked about a struggle in a relationship you were personally dealing with, that the whole understanding of the cuckoo actually became the ha-ha moment for you, and you realizing, saying, oh my goodness, this has been reorienting my mind in a wrong way.
Yes, it was very much an aha moment. And the relationship with that person, they didn't change, but I changed. And the boundaries I set in the relationship. And that photo I showed you earlier, I laminated it and took it into my session, because I realized we all have a cuckoo, and that it brought so much self-compassion, and it eradicated confusion. So I really was able to not always feel selfish and guilty when I was engaging with this person.
So is there a couple, little helps that you can give us and our viewers to just make us more cognizant of the fact that, oh, you know what, I've really been taken in by a negative thought pattern? How do we recognize that? And as you share that, I'm thinking of a situation as well where someone just confided to my wife that they realized they needed to change, but they've gotten so used to the way they have been living, they weren't sure they wanted to do it because they'd be learning. They're not sure they want to learn how to be free.
I tell my clients often that this is hard work. It's hard, but it's the right kind of hard. And it's not a pain-free process, but neither is living with this type of cuckoo dynamic. So you really have to get to the place in your life where you think, I am ready to do the work because this is becoming too painful. You can't force someone to want to do the work. They have to get themselves to a place where they really want to pursue freedom and understanding. It's not a quick fix. It's not a 3-step process. But when you are willing to do the deep soul work, and especially having someone else come alongside you, it really creates a place where you can face the things that you're afraid of and start to identify the ways you lie to yourself, so you can access these hidden truths that can start to bring freedom.
Andrea, if I could ask you this, just as we wrap up today, you're a counselor, you've written this great book on the Cuckoo Syndrome. We want to encourage people to get a hold of it. But what are the things you specifically do to keep your mind healthy and strong? Are there a couple things that you do?
Yes, and in the book, my book, The Cuckoo Syndrome, it gives you very practical, easy to understand steps on how to make your life or your nest not susceptible to being the target of unhealthy relationships with other people and unhealthy relationships with yourself. But something I would encourage you to do every single day is to ask yourself, what do I think? What do I want? And what do I feel? Because it helps you get in touch with what is going on within you. Because a lot of us have a tendency to put the focus on other people.
Right.
And then we start to lose ourself and our voice. And again, if you feel guilty and selfish, that's how you know you're on the right path, because the tendency is to give a lot of yourself to other people, and then you end up drained.
Wow. Very informative, very helpful information. Thank you so much for joining us today on the show.
Thank you, Mike and Julie, for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Well, it's a pleasure for us. We look forward to chatting again.
Thank you.
All right, stay with us, everyone. We'll be right back.
Through the ups and downs, the storms and droughts, you never leave my side. You who hold the stars up in the sky.
When my heart is torn and I'm weak and worn, with no words left to speak, your mighty presence brings me to my knees. You are good always. Lord, you are the potter, I'm the clay.
You know, I really resonate with what Andrea has written about the Cuckoo Syndrome, because I am a person who's very empathetic, and I try to be there for people, and there are times I've had in my life where I have felt so guilty and like I'm not doing enough, and it's just been so draining, and yet I don't know how to get out of it, because then I feel I'm letting that person down, but in the long run I'm actually being so drained, and it's really difficult.
I'm getting drained just listening to that.
I know, right?
Yeah.
But what about you,
But that
Mike?
happens.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things is, it's an incredible analogy, the Cuckoo Syndrome.
It really is.
Of course, with my warped sense of humor, I'm always flip-flopping, and I'm thinking, who is nuts? Who's cuckoo? Who's the cuckoo?
Well, that's why I said, how do we recognize if we're the cuckoo, Because you don't want to be that person to somebody who's really trying to be there and invest.
And here's one of the things that I've picked up. I think the way that the cuckoo bird comes into our nests, okay, this is my own hypothesis, based on, a YouTube movie I watched last night. No. But here's my hypothesis. I want to be dead serious, is that we allow little things in, hoping that the person will change, or they'll address things, and they'll improve upon it. But they don't.
Right. And then kind of excuse it.
You excuse it, and all of a sudden, you're stuck with it.
Right.
And that can be with family, it can be with friends, it can be with anyone. And then suddenly, we get to the point we throw up our hands and say, I can't cope with it anymore.
Right.
What am I going to do? And I don't want people to get to that point. I've seen it so much.
No. And then you lose the opportunity to be able to speak into their life if you have the proper boundaries set up so that you don't feel drained. And I think that's important, because we have to engage with people on all different levels, but we need to know what kind of boundaries do we need with certain relationships so that we can actually have them be healthy and productive.
Absolutely. So I want to encourage people, get a copy of this book.
Yes.
It's a great book. I know you're going to enjoy it, and it'll help you to watch out for the toxic relationships that bring you down. Hopefully you remember from yesterday's program, we were talking in Mark chapter 5, and it was a story about a leader in the synagogue. His name was Jairus, and he comes to Jesus and he says, my little daughter is dying. Please do something. And Jesus agrees to go to his house and heal her. But on the way, there is a woman, and there's crowds all around him. There is a woman who comes up behind and says, if I can only touch his cloak, the outer coat that Jesus was wearing, I will be healed. She'd had an issue of blood for years and years and years, and no one had healed her. She was distraught. She was emotionally laid bare. There was nothing left. And she reaches out and touches Jesus' cloak. And then all of a sudden, Jesus turned around and said, who touched me? And the disciples are saying, who touched you? You're surrounded by all sorts of people. And Jesus said, no. He said, someone has touched me. And he recognized that someone had touched him in faith. And folks, as we journey through life, whether you're in the midst of a difficult situation today, maybe you need God's physical healing, maybe it's a spiritual rebirth that you need in your life today. I don't know your situation. I don't know the pain that you're carrying, but we have a Savior who does know, who does care. But here's the problem. Many times we don't believe that. Just like Jairus, all of a sudden they're going to his house and Jesus gets sidetracked by a crowd of people. And we're going to find now that the next part, after he heals this lady who touched his cloak, and he said, "Daughter, your faith has made you well, go in peace." But while he was speaking, there came from the ruler's house someone who said, "Your daughter is dead," and says that to Jairus. Why trouble the teacher any further? You imagine a father hearing that word, that your daughter is dead? He was just crestfallen. I mean, he was thinking, God, why didn't you come when I asked you to come? And many times we struggle with God's timing, wishing that he would answer us right away. But here's what we need to remember. God's timing is not always our timing, but God is never in a hurry and he is never late. His timing is perfect. There is, however, a faith connection. And what does Jesus do? He turns to Jairus and he turns to the people and he said, "Do not fear, only believe." And there are some of you here today that need to hear that phrase today. Do not fear, only believe. You have to choose who you're going to believe. And what we find happening is that Jesus then comes and he takes two of the disciples, Peter and James, and he says to the people, "Why are you making such a commotion outside of the little daughter's where she had just passed away?" And he says, "The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at them so he put everybody outside. He put people outside who didn't have faith, because you don't need to be in that negative environment. And he goes in and he takes her by the hand and says, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." And immediately the girl got up and began walking, for she was 12 years of age. And everybody, of course, was surprised. Well, what do we need to learn from this passage as we journey through the stuff of life that you're going through? I think first and foremost, we need to remember that there are measurable results when we reach out and touch Jesus in faith, just like that lady touched his cloak. That we come to Jesus like Jairus did, and we discover oftentimes his timing is different than my timing. But it's in the midst of that, we can be assured of the fact God is still in control. However, just like the people came up to Jairus, they poured all cold water. They said, "Tell the teacher not to bother. Your daughter has already died." It was almost like ruthless the way that they spoke. And I've learned that even well-meaning people will pour cold water on you with their words. But in the midst of your desperate situation today, listen for what Jesus is saying to you. Here are some God whispers I want to close with today. Don't be afraid. Just believe. Don't quit. Step up. Take a risk. Do something more impactful. Apologize now and trust Jesus more.